Steve Moran here, and we are doing another episode of the Senior Housing Forum podcast. And today I am talking to Dylan. I'm sorry, dropped your last name here at the last moment.
Dylan Kessler.
Dylan Kessler, and you are with Primrose Retirement. We are mutual fan clubs, Senior Housing Forum and Primrose Retirement. Tell us a little bit about your role with Primrose.
Well, my role is in our position of training and development. So my title is Training and Development Coordinator. And for anyone that works in senior living, they know that encompasses a lot because senior living really spans a wide spectrum of needs when it comes to our workforce. So I get the opportunity to work in a lot of different areas of the company, in the industry. And gosh, I've learned a lot about what goes into running a building since I've been in this role, all the stressors and the rewarding things too, but mostly what our teams actually go through and what they need to be successful.
So today, what we're actually going to talk a little bit about is that you've had great success both in retention, in both recruiting and retention, but particularly we're going to talk about retention, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, go ahead.
Well, we knew that our turnover wasn't good. We didn't really realize how dramatic it was until I came into this role a little over 2 years ago, and I started calculating what our turnover was and what our turnover costs were. The costs associated with turnover, as you know, are astronomical. Not just in a dollar sense, but in the emotional toll it takes on our teams. So we tried to dig into that to figure out what is it and how can we solve it. Obviously, some amount of turnover is inevitable. Sometimes some turnover is necessary. But what can we do to make our work environment adopt the person-centered care approach to our employees that we espouse for our residents? So to do that, I knew that we needed to take a look at, first, how do we hire? Are we being conscientious? Are we being responsible in our hiring? And second, how are we onboarding people? Are we being responsible to our team members in how we're bringing them into our culture? Are we explaining the expectations? Are we giving them everything that they need in order to be successful? And then, of course, beyond that, the third prong is ongoing employee engagement. So coming into that, I'll be honest that I made a few mistakes thinking, well, our highest turnover is with our frontline staff, right? So
that's what everybody assumes.
Right. So let's focus on what we're doing with our frontline staff. And I had to take a step back and say, well, maybe that's not it. Maybe the issue's at the home office here. Let's go back to that and kind of ping-ponging around. And what I finally came to was we have great managers in our buildings, but we don't always do a great job of giving them the tools that they need to be successful. So that's where we tried to zero in on, was looking at our leaders in our communities, our executive directors, our directors of nursing, our sales directors, our directors of dining, life and anyone that's on our management team in our communities. We even pull the property maintenance into that because they're considered on our leadership team. And we try to focus with them, especially when we're opening a new community, to bring them along in the Primrose way of doing things. So to start with that, we again started with, well, how do we teach them how to enter bills correctly? How do we do the accounting things? And we had to say, stop, let's take a step back. How do we teach them how to be good leaders? How do we teach them how to be good leaders?
I want to stop you here for a second.
Yeah.
This is so exciting to me because I think that this is the most critical area that we miss in the senior living space, is if you're lucky enough to have worked under a good leader, you might end up being you got onto the job training and you might get great training, but mostly that doesn't happen. And so to hear you say, let's focus on how to make them into good leaders or help them become great leaders just warms my heart. So go ahead.
Well, and I come from a little bit of a unique perspective on this. I've never been an executive director in a building. My qualifications for this is, before I came to Primrose, before I joined this industry, I had a terrible boss. So I know what it feels like to quit a boss. And we know that people quit people. So we wanted to say, when we open a community, We know that in that first year, there's so much stress, there's so much anxiety, and there's so much turnover because of that. So we looked back at our previous projects and saw huge numbers of turnover, especially in our management team. So we took a look at that and said, what can we do about it? And our mechanism, and I'm not saying it's the perfect, but it's an evolving tool. What we do is, as soon as we hire everyone on our management team, and before we open a community, we take a team from our home office and we go out and have a retreat with just that leadership team. And it's basically a one-on-one retreat. A lot of times we wind up having more home office staff there than we do community staff. And we talk through, really we structure it to be about 3 days. And those 3 days include knowing yourself as a leader. You know, what's your DISC profile? What's your why? Why do you want to be here? Why do you love what you do? How do you communicate that? What's the difference between a boss and a servant leader? Spend an entire day doing that. The second day then is understanding the roles of everyone else on your team, your management team. What's expected of them? What are their main stressors? How can you help them? And really getting to know them as not just a person, but a colleague and a subject matter expert as well. And then the third day is all about person-centered care. And I mentioned this a little bit before, but we look at person-centered care as applying just as much to our employees as it does to our residents. And we expect our frontline staff to care for our residents in a very person-centered way. And we use this idea of a trickle-down form of service. We expect our managers to treat their employees, their team members, with that person-centered care focus as well. So we talk through practical aspects of how to do that. It turns into really some good brainstorming and dialogue, some role-playing, and then we equip them to train the rest of their staff. So we take it from that first level of managers, and we train them in all the leadership things, the practical things. We've gotten into memory care lately, so we even do a dementia simulator for those managers, so they know what it feels like to care for and to be a resident living with dementia. And then we take it down to the next level and have those leaders, with some of us from the home office, lead their all-staff training too. And we've been relying a lot on role-playing and simulations for that. We incorporate a lot of what we talk about in our leadership training into building those first staff up as mentors, so that as we keep adding new staff, we have a culture in place that they get to come be a part of. We don't have to constantly be defining that and struggling to defend that culture. This all-staff training is where it gets really fun, especially in the memory care setting, because we will take a few of us from the home office down there and we'll be residents. So we will spend an entire day living out what it means to be a caregiver in a memory care. All the way from, they'll walk in the morning and one of us is laying in a bed and they have to figure out how to wake us up in the best way, how to give us a good morning experience, how to get us down for breakfast, how to facilitate a meal with multiple residents with different levels of dementia that they're living with, facilitating activities. We simulate a few elopements, communication aspects. How do you facilitate communication between shift changes and still get all your charting and laundry and housekeeping and everything done? And that's where it gets really fun, because we give them the opportunity to fail and then take a step back and say, all right, let's talk about that in a way that you don't really get to in the real world.
So how do you accomplish that without people just feeling kind of put down or beat down through that process? So I'll give you an example. So I used to be a volunteer ski patroller. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you do, so very similar to this, is you run scenarios. And particularly in kind of the testing, there's sort of this pass-fail thing, but they kind of set you up to fail. And so they'll give you a mock patient with multiple things going on, where unless you do it exactly perfectly right, your patient's going to die. And so about 80 or 90% of the time they die. And it's designed to be a training experience, but honestly, it wasn't. When I did it and I killed my patient, it wasn't very much fun. And I'm not sure I learned anything because it was so high stress. So how do you work around that?
That's actually part of it.
Okay.
And a little bit intentional, not to beat them down, but to show them how to build themselves back up. Anyone
Okay.
that's worked in a memory care or spent more than about 10 minutes in a memory care knows that it is completely draining. So what we do is we use that real life, that real emotion, and show them that the way to build yourself back up is to engage with those employees around you, the rest of your team. So after every simulation, after every failure or success, we all sit down in a room and debrief. And we don't have to model it for very long before their team starts picking up and going, yeah, but you did this right, you did this right. And I learned a lot from that. So you see all of a sudden that they're picking up that it's on them to build each other up. And in that way, it's not on the home office anymore to make them feel good. They already feel important, and everyone else on that team builds them up. So no, your point is absolutely spot on. They do get a little beaten down, and that's part of it. We want to simulate this is real, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. And that's why we go back to as well that why. At the end of the day, why are you there? Why is everyone else on your team there? Because it's important to know that you're working with passionate people.
Yeah. So can you talk to me a little bit about, I don't know whether you're willing, since this is live and real, right? We didn't rehearse any of this, and I didn't tell you what I was going to ask. And so I was worried because so I need to say, it's okay to say, I'm not going to share that. But can you talk to me about sort of before and after turnover numbers?
I don't have the hard numbers in front of me. But what I can tell you is when we looked back at our previous couple of projects, we were turning over entire management teams.
Wow.
Not always, and not across the board, but in that first year, we were turning over a lot of key management positions. And that's not to say that they weren't good people. That's not to say that we're not good people, but there was some breakdown in between there. So engaging all the different departments here at our home office, looking back at all of our different communities and getting their input, we were able to say, these are our best practices. This is what it really means to be a part of the Primrose world. So coming into this, and we've only been doing it for about a year, a little over a year now, and we've opened a few buildings with it. We've been able to turn around and say those numbers are dramatically reduced.
Okay.
The cost savings in dollar amounts is huge. And all of a sudden we bring all of our executive directors back to the home office every year. We recognize all of them all of a sudden. There aren't that many new faces anymore. So yeah, I wish I had those numbers tabulated for you. I promise I'll follow up with you when we have a little bit more data though.
Good. I would love to hear those numbers. So really the key, so let me just sort of walk through the steps again and make sure I've got it right, because for me, the reason for doing these podcasts and these video casts is really to help other providers be able to learn how to do this better. So the first thing, I guess, was really recognition that you had a problem.
Yeah. Yep.
And then coupled with the idea that it was possible to fix it. Mm-hmm. Because when I talk to people, I sometimes have the sense that operators, probably nobody who's an audience here, but that operators sometimes feel like, it's not very good, but there really is not much you can do about it.
Right.
And you obviously believe that there was something you could do about it.
We want to be the best, just like everyone else does, and we have to start with recognizing there is a problem.
And then you put together this pre-opening process to set people up for success. Mm-hmm. So 3 days is a lot with the whole team like that. And you do it offsite typically, so usually before the building's open? Yeah,
we do. We try to. And we actually started with a longer schedule and had to condense it down a little bit. So there's been a lot of trial and error with that. But the key components have stayed the same.
Do you have anything that's not so proprietary that you'd be willing to share about maybe an outline of the 3 days?
Yeah.
And those are kind of secret sauce things, and so I'm always a little nervous about asking. But
no, that's okay. I don't have any problem sharing that, because if other communities, other companies are willing to train their EDs like this and their key management staff, I feel confident when we steal them from those companies, they'll be well trained. So that's great. Day one is knowing yourself. All about self-awareness. That entirely, who are you as a leader? Why are you doing what you're doing? Is this the right place for you? How are you seen? How do you communicate? What are your weaknesses? What are you most proud of? So we go over the history of our company and start off with telling them why we're passionate about what we do, why we do what we do, and then help them find why they're doing what they do, and really defining that. We help them define what their first team is, who's their group that they trust, who can they go back to. We identify potential silos, that silo mentality of only having communication flow straight up and down and not across. What are potentials? What have we seen those to be? And how do you break those down? We use the DISC personality assessment, and we simulate a lot of things with that. And then we practice some delegation tips, because no one can do this job alone. The second day is understanding everyone's role within your team. And that's where we get our subject matter experts from the home office up there and say, here's what's on everyone's plate, and here's what you can do to help. So we do a lot of simulations with that too, of how do you manage your day just to make sure that you get everything done, and how do you protect everyone else's time to ensure that everyone on the team is getting their stuff done. And then that third day really is that person-centered care focus. So we start the day with talking about how do we encounter our employees? How do we encounter our team members? And I don't say that lightly either, not just bumping into them, but how do we really have an encounter with them? So we talk about generational traits. We get a lot of generations in the workforce right now. Not everyone communicates the same way. Not everyone shows or appreciates appreciation the same way. We talk through and practice how to do that. And a lot of these seem like really basic things, and I hope they are. But unless we speak and define them, we can't make any assumptions that there are standards to it. And then we shift a little bit and say, now that you're encountering your employees, let's talk about what it means to have person-centered care for your residents. That's where we do that dementia simulation. That we built a simulator. We built really a fun activity to go through and to experience it, to offer care. Talk about the importance of communication with residents and families. What should that look like? What often does it look like? How do you accomplish everything you need to in a day when keeping that resident's dignity at the forefront of it? And I should say too that we've taken this model and tried to adapt it to when we hire a new ED, particularly in existing communities as well. And to accomplish that, we know that it's tough to do that training on site. So typically within about the first 30 days of that new ED starting, we bring them back here to our home office in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And we bring them back here. We put them in a room with every member of the home office team that they're going to need to talk with. We simulate a lot of these things in a smaller scale environment. We sit them down with the CEO, we sit them down with the president, and they get time to understand why they're passionate about what they do. And then we drill in on all the how-to type things, all the entering bills, all the scheduling, those type things. But we feel like we want to find the right person. And you can't teach someone who to be. You can teach them what to do, but you can't teach them who to be. So bringing them back here to the home office, we let them know who we are, and we get to know who they are too. Then we can start the task type things.
So once you've got a team trained, particularly I'm thinking executive directors, and probably executive directors more than anybody else, maybe a little bit your regionals. What do you do to facilitate ongoing training for them so they continue to grow as leaders?
Great question. We do two on-site type things. Well, not on-site, together. In-person trainings. One is we do an annual retreat where we pull all of our executive directors together. We take them somewhere off-site. That's a fun time, a little bit of a rah-rah celebration. We do some practical things there too, and there's a lot of best practices sharing where they're teaching each other. That's great. The second thing that we do is each year, and I mentioned this, but each year all of our executive directors come back here to our home office. And we do want to look at that as more of a retreat for them too. They're coming back here to their home office to get some hands-on training. I have a group of 12 executive directors downstairs right now that are experiencing that this week. It's been a really great week because we put our home office staff in front of them, and they're going through practical things, soft skills. We had a great session the other day on how to work with passive-aggressive people, because we know that wherever you are in the world, you have a few of those. How do you address that? And we did a lot of role-playing and simulations with that. Not all the conversations are, and I think this is important to say, not all the conversations are pleasant or easy, because we want to become the best that we can be. And a lot of the times those executive directors have to call us on it. So we believe in a lot of that hands-on type training. Obviously, we utilize Skype all the time, online tools throughout the year. We're constantly pumping out different trainings that we're building in-house at Primrose now, which is really exciting. We utilize outside resources as well, but currently we're building our own trainings. We have
that's terrific.
Dementia expert, and she's helping us do that. We have in-house dining expert, and we're working on dining things with him. I mean, we're doing everything from how do you mop the kitchen effectively to driving the bus to communicating with residents. So it's really been an exciting thing that we've been able to try to reach people at a lot of different levels here.
So one of the things I really like about your whole story is the sort of the subtext. I think there's sort of this sense that in order to really affect culture change, that it takes 5 to 7 years. And I understand you're not all the way there by a long shot, but you've been able to make really substantive change in 2 years, right? Or a little bit less, maybe a little bit less. And so I think that ought to be real encouragement for folks who are watching or listening to this podcast. So
yeah, and you hit on it earlier. The first step is accepting that things maybe aren't right and naming what those items are, and coming up with a plan on that. Honestly, I've failed more times than I care to admit in this job, trying to do different things, throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. But some of those failures have, with a little tweaking, turned out to be real successes. And I have one other item, if I can, that I want to share with you that has been a really exciting thing for us. And it goes back to that even before the training and onboarding, but the hiring. We've been working with a company called Insight Worldwide to develop and implement pre-employment assessments so that we're sure that we're hiring people that, the old joke is, we're just hiring someone with a pulse because we need someone. And I think that's more true in healthcare now than ever before. But these assessments get pumped out to them when they submit their application. We just say, you need to take this before we'll consider you. But it helps us get a good snapshot of who they are. And more importantly, what to ask during their initial interview. So it ranks them on things like compassion, trust, honesty, respect, patience. There are even questions on there about, whether they'll come to work drunk or high, whether they'll commit workers' comp fraud. It's amazing how many people actually admit that kind of stuff too.
Is that right? That it sort of makes me smile, right? Because I'm thinking, somebody asked me that, I don't care what was true, I would say no. It's
amazing. So this system's built by research psychologists.
Right.
A lot more thought that goes into it than I'm capable of, but the system's great. So you get a snapshot, you look at it and say, well, looks like Steve scored pretty well in all these areas. Let's bring him in for the interview. And this is where it gets really useful for our teams. Based on how that applicant answered questions, it generates questions for the interview. So you bring them in and you get to drill down on, it sounded like that honesty section was a little bit low. Let's pull up the questions that it gives us and really drill in on why that is and see if we can understand who this person is before we invest a bunch of time and money in training them and bringing them into our team. So that's been really exciting. They've actually added to that and started doing this with our management team members now too. They're building assessments specifically for senior living, EDs, DONs. We're working on a sales director one now. So it's been really exciting for us to pull that veil away a little bit of the mystery of the hiring process and to implement a standard for us. So that's been, I think, a good way to up the quality of employees that we're finding too.
When you bring your executive directors in for ongoing training, how long does it, a week, or how long do you bring them in for typically?
Yeah, they're typically here for 3 full days,
Okay.
which is a lot of time away from the building.
It is, and it's a lot of intensity, right?
It is.
So
And we try to structure that so it's not all work. We just had a great lunch today with everyone in our home office building and the EDs, and we had some fun. I know they're going to spend some time team building tonight, because going back to when you're feeling down, when you're feeling defeated, who do you go back to? You go back to your colleagues. And for our EDs, a lot of times they know they can't dump on the people below them, but they can seek influence and input from those on the same level.
Yeah, I think that having good peer relations is so important. You know, I run sort of a one-person show with Senior Housing Forum, and so I have a group of 4 or 5 people that I talk to, some of them every week, many of them several times a month, because I just need, you know, people to bounce ideas off of and to think about. And so that's really good. And I think too often as an executive director, you're sort of all alone, right? You can't really talk to those who are reporting to you. Oftentimes you can't really talk to your boss. And so having those peer relations is really important. So,
well, and they're the experts. That's the attitude that we've had to take with this, is we don't know what they need. And we don't know what we don't know. So we really rely on them to be honest and come to us with what we can do better for them.
Yep. So I want to do just a couple of metrics with you here. So how many communities do you have now?
Let's see. We are at, we have a couple that are coming up on opening. So we have, I think right now, 36 in 17 states.
Okay. And 2 almost ready to open, you think?
One's going to be opening here this fall, and then one right towards the end of the year.
Okay. And so represents about how many beds? Or units? Units, I should say.
As an entire company?
As an entire company.
Ooh.
This is a test.
Yikes. I might have to come back to that.
Now I'm making you feel bad. I don't want to do that, you know?
You know, I don't remember exactly what the number is on that.
Okay.
I can look it up and get it to you, though.
That'd be great. And then here's my last big question that I'm asking. I hope I don't have a trifecta here. But can you, and again, you may not want to share this, but do you know what your overall occupancy is for stabilized buildings?
I can't remember exactly what it is there. Here's something I can tell you, though, is I've been able to find that our communities with higher compliance of using that hiring tool that I told you about tend to have lower turnover and higher occupancy.
That's it for this episode of the Senior Housing Forum podcast. You can check out our other great resources at www.seniorhousingforum.com. I wanted to close by saying lead well, lead strong, and more than anything else, lead with great compassion. If you have an idea for this podcast, we'd love to hear about it. My name is Steve Moran, and you can email me at smoran@seniorhousingforum.net. See you next time.